UNL Extension livestock economist Kate Brooks joined us earlier this week to analyze the current picture for both cow and pig herds. Those two sectors account for more than 80% of soybean meal consumption in Nebraska. In its quarterly hogs and pigs report released last week, the USDA estimated the size of the U.S. inventory at 65.4 million head. The total is down 2% from a year ago, but up 6% from June. We already know that the country's holding of cattle and calves is the lowest since the USDA began tracking such data in 1973. We talked with Kate Tuesday morning.
We've continued to see declining cattle numbers in the U.S. 2014 was another decline. The new report will come out January 1, 2015. We're hoping to see maybe some steadying of that herd, maybe slight increases in the cow herd. If we look at slaughter numbers, heifer and cow slaughter numbers in particular, we're starting to see a decline in those year over year. And so hopefully that's a sign of some indication that we're starting to rebuild this cow herd.
Are there any notable trends in the monthly cattle on feed reports?
So if we look at September cattle on feed numbers, we're actually seeing the 25th consecutive month where numbers were below year-ago levels for September. If we look at placements and marketings for September, again, we saw those lowest numbers that we've seen since back to when we started reporting those numbers in 1996. So continuing to see some declines in cattle on feed numbers, continuing to see that tightness in supply.
What about specifically for Nebraska? Anything to note?
If we look at Nebraska, Iowa, and add in South Dakota there, while the U.S. cattle on feed numbers continue to be declining, we've actually seen increases in cattle on feed numbers for September and previous months over year-ago levels. So starting to see maybe some movement of that cattle on feed number to the north.
Any reason behind that?
A lot of that's probably more of efficiency. We're located, we have a lot of small farmer feeders in Iowa, access to distillers grains here in Nebraska. So maybe seeing some input efficiencies in the northern region.
You mentioned the cattle inventory report that we'll get next January. What are you hoping we see there? Some sort of a climb, or at least an indication that there's a bottom in place?
Yeah, hopefully the report that came out in 2014 was actually that bottom, and maybe we'll start to see some increases in our numbers here in 2015, showing us that we're starting to increase that herd.
These things in mind, give me an overview of where the markets currently stand for prices.
Feeder calf prices are at all-time highs, continuing to see strength in those. Typically, we see feeder calf prices starting to dwindle a little bit here in the fall. We're not seeing that. We're still seeing some strength in those feeder calf prices. Supply is tight. As we move into fed cattle prices, we've been seeing some volatility. Not quite sure, there's about a $10 volatility there over the last several weeks. Wholesale prices have been declining, and so fed cattle prices, still well above year-ago levels, but still seeing some volatility there.
Let's look at the hogs and pigs number. The quarterly hogs and pigs report came out last week, 65.4 million head. But tell me, kind of how you're looking at this from an economist perspective on the porcine epidemic diarrhea virus.
The porcine epidemic virus has affected pig numbers for the last 17 months. As we look at the USDA's estimation for 2015 hog slaughter, they're looking at 2015 hog slaughter to be above this year levels, but it's still below 11, 12, and 13 numbers. If we look at farrowing intentions, it looks like producers are looking at those market signals, looking at those higher prices, those declining feed costs, and actually looking at expanding. Farrowing intentions for the coming months was about 4% above year-ago levels. PED is going to be a big indication as whether or not we can continue to grow the pig herd and increase production in the coming months to next year.
But it looks like producers are willing to do so.
It appears that they're taking those market signals and at least trying to minimize the PED effects.
Okay, so cattle and hogs, let's talk about meat prices in beef, pork, chicken. Do they indicate that those prices will remain high?
We've continued to see increases, especially in pork and beef in the last several months. Maybe some not necessarily as big of increases in chicken, some sustaining of those prices there. As we go forward, beef, again, we're still short supply. There's nothing we can do there in the immediate factors, so probably continuing to see record prices on the beef side. Pork, if they can minimize some of the effects of PED and start to ramp up production, we might see some maintenance of that price going forward. But again, we're in tight supply in all meat products, so probably continue to see some high prices there.